Man, what's cracking, gang? It's T Nasty, and I'm back with another banger for you guys. We are back once again with another tier list because I am a whore for views, and these seem to do well on YouTube. I'll just keep it 100. But I was sitting here thinking with my 200 IQ brain, just brainstorming the most brilliant ideas, as I always do. And I was reminded of how some of my favorite fighters are the old heads in the UFC. I love me and Unk. So I decided for this video, I'm going to give you guys the UFC old heads tier list. These are the guys you're going to see arguing over the last portion of cheesy potatoes at the 4th of July barbecue. They're going to be getting into political debates at Thanksgiving. I know you guys needed some objective truth in your lives, so that's what I'm here to deliver. As you guys know, this is the home of 100% accurate and factual takes, so prepare yourselves to be amazed by my 100% factual, objective, and truthful UFC old head ranking that cannot be argued. As some ground rules for this tier list, I am considering a UFC old head to be a fighter who is at least 35 years old and has been in the UFC for at least 10 years, and of course they have to be in a declining trajectory for their career. They also must still be an active fighter on the roster. I could just rank all the legends that are still around the scene, but that would take way too long. And I will have some honorable mentions at the end, as there are a few fighters who fit this criteria but are either still a top contender or just don't feel like an old head to me, so I will not be ranking them. So the way this is going to go down is we got the S tier for any fighter that is definitely an old head, but they still got it and are in the mix in their division. Either that or they're just goated and I love them. Once again, my takes are 100% factual and cannot be argued, so I don't want to hear nothing about that in the comments. And then we have the F tier for any of these fighters who are absolutely washed on a terrible losing streak, or they just need to let it go and hang up the gloves. And then the middle tiers are for anybody who falls in between. Now the last thing I want to say before we get into this, I want to give a quick shout out to my boy DC. Like I said, I'm not going to rank anybody who isn't an active fighter, but we all know he would be going in the S tier if I could rank him. DC is the Unk of the UFC. Alright, with all that being said, let's rank these old heads. Starting off with my boy Steven Wonderboy Thompson. Steven is 41 years old and made his UFC debut on February 4th, 2012. So just over 12 years in the UFC. Steven is definitely an old head, but he's almost one that doesn't feel like he is, you know? Maybe it's that baby face, but I just look at him and some of these other guys and they don't look the same to me. But regardless, he is still an old head and definitely on the decline of his career. He can still hang with most guys on the feet, but any hint of grappling and he's done. He is still a great fighter though, and I think he has a few more fights left in the tank, so I'm going to go ahead and throw Wonderboy in the A tier. Next up, we got Jose Aldo. He is 36 years old and made his UFC debut on April 30th, 2011. So just barely over the age threshold, but certainly an old head when it comes to fight experience. It genuinely shocks me every time I see that he isn't even really close to 40 yet, because we have seen him for so long. I considered not even ranking him, but he is showing signs of washness, so I had to consider him for this tier list. It pains me to say this, but he is definitely turning into an old head. He's at least at the point in his career where he can still hang with anybody, even the young guns, but it just seems like he doesn't have it in him to be his old self and really put an ass whooping on these guys like he used to. He doesn't use leg kicks at all anymore, pretty much just boxing. And when guys try to take him down, he just kind of accepts it now. He's still hard to take down, but you can pretty easily immobilize him by holding him against the cage. Fuck you, Mario Batista, by the way. But anyways, Jose Aldo is going in the A tier as well. Next up, we got my fucking boy, Nick Diaz. Now, it's honestly surprising he's even still on the roster. He literally went almost a decade without fighting until he came back to scrap with Robbie Lawler in 2022. I never thought I'd see him quit the way he did in that fight, but I've heard that he wasn't even training for that fight at all and was coerced into it by his management. So with that into consideration, it's pretty admirable he did as well as he did in that fight. Maybe I'm just dick sucking, but I'm getting off track. Nick is 41 years old and made his UFC debut on September 26, 2003. He has not fought much over recent years, but he actually is booked to fight once again in December against Vicente Luque. And am I crazy for thinking he's going to win? Like, obviously I'm very biased, but objectively, he is a little washed clearly after watching his last fight. But I think he can still box with anybody if his heart is in it, and if, of course, he has legendary cardio. I'm throwing my boy Nick in the S tier. I don't care. This is my list, and it's 100% factual, so argue with the wall in the comments. I'm not going to elaborate any further. Moving on to the reason you guys are probably watching this video. The man in the thumbnail, Tony Ferguson. Now, I could go on some long spiel, but I think we all know how it is with Tony. He is about as washed as you could possibly be. 8-fight losing streak. It's honestly just sad at this point. Tony, you need to retire. I cannot watch you lose again, dude. He used to be unfinishable, but now he's getting choked out by fucking Michael Chiesa, bro. Fucking Michael Chiesa. He is 40 years old and made his UFC debut on June 4th, 2011. Well over the requirements for this list, but beyond that, his career is just done. It's seriously fucking hard to watch this guy anymore. We all love him, but he is just not the same. Like I said, I love the guy. I want to throw him in S tier, but I have to stay objective. This list is 100% factual, so I cannot justify putting him any higher than C tier. The only thing saving him from F tier is the fact that we all love him so much. I'm sorry to all the El Kukui fans out there, but Tony Ferguson is fucking cooked and absolutely washed beyond belief. Next. Alright, next up we got Court McGee. Now, he isn't as popular of a fighter, most of you guys probably don't even know him, but he's been around for a long time and is just overall a cool guy. He's a survivor of drug addiction and really turned his life around from complete junkie to UFC legend. But he is 39 years old and made his UFC debut on June 19th, 2010. With 14 years in the UFC, he definitely qualifies as an old head. He actually just got a win on UFC 307 a few weeks ago against another guy on this list, Tim Means. So he proved he can still go. He definitely can't hang with the young guns like he used to, but amongst the other veterans and old heads, he still's got gas left in the tank. I think Court is a good fighter and an overall cool ass dude, so I'm going to go ahead and rank him in the B tier. Speaking of Tim Means, he is next up on this list. He is relatively in the same boat as Court McGee. Been around for a long time, grizzled vet, but not super popular. He is 40 years old and made his UFC debut on February 15, 2012. Definitely an old head, but not quite as cool as Court McGee in my opinion. He just doesn't really have a story to him. He's just kind of a guy who's been around forever. Not hating or nothing, but I really just don't have anything to show him much love for other than his longevity. He also did just lose to Court McGee in the first round, so he can't even really hang with the other old guys anymore. I'm going to have to put him in the C tier just because he doesn't look insanely washed, but it may be time for him to hang it up soon. Moving on, we have Darren Elkins. Now, this dude somehow just fought last night and picked up a win against Daniel Pineda. It's honestly crazy that he's been able to stretch his career out this long based on some of the wars he's been in and the damage he has taken. They call him the damage for a reason. This dude definitely has CTE. But he is 40 years old and made his UFC debut on March 21st, 2010. This guy wears his experience more than just about anybody else on this list. He did just pick up a win last night, but it was against another old head who retired after. I'm just going to keep it real, he's washed. If he fights anybody who isn't another vet, he is just there to get his ass beat. Every single time. He only really can hang with other old heads. He isn't quite as washed as Tony Ferguson. Like, at least he's still winning fights, but it is close for sure, and I'm not a huge fan of him, so Darren Elkins is going to be our first F tier. Alright, now for my GOAT, Clay Guida. I fucking love you, Clay. I'll never forget when I met you. But it may just be time to hang it up. He is 42 years old and made his UFC debut on March 10th, 2006. He is one of the most washed guys in this whole damn list. Really, his only job in the UFC nowadays is to be a legend for prospects to beat up. Like, he literally gets his ass beat in almost every fight now. Really, the only guys he can get wins against is other old heads. Like, I'm pretty sure he has the record for the most losses in UFC history, which is just insane. But anyways, Clay, you're in the same boat as Tony Ferguson. You're fucking washed, but I love you so much, so you're going in the C tier. Continuing on, we got Jim fucking Miller. This dude is fucking goated. He's that uncle that is pushing 50, but is still in killer shape and is always bringing baddies to the family get-togethers. Jim is 41 years old and made his UFC debut on October 18, 2008. But don't let that fool you, he is still a beast. He's one of the longest tenured fighters on this list, but he's still going out there and getting wins against young fighters and looking as good as ever. He's the only man to compete at UFC 100, 200, and 300. He's just a chill dude, great fighter, and overall badass. One of the best old heads altogether in the UFC right now. Jim fucking Miller is going in the S tier. Next up, we have the only woman on this list, Holly Holm. Now, everybody knows Holly. She pulled off one of the greatest upset wins of all time against Ronda Rousey, but that was almost 10 years ago in of itself. She is still kicking, but she probably will be retiring soon as her career trajectory is definitely declining. She is 43 years old and made her UFC debut on February 28, 2015. Technically just under the 10 years in the UFC requirement, but I don't care, I'm counting it. Holly can definitely still hang in there, but she isn't as elite as she used to be. She's definitely starting to get a little washed, and it's kind of at the point in her career where she is there to put over other young fighters. But with her name value, she's always a couple wins away from a title fight. I'm going to go ahead and throw Holly in the B tier since she is definitely starting to get washed, but she still can compete with the young girls. We're getting there, guys. Next up is Chris Weidman. Chris is one of the few guys on this list who became champion, but he is definitely starting to get washed for sure. I'm going to just be honest, straight off the bat, guys, I do not like Chris Weidman at all. He's that one uncle who is just constantly hating on the younger generation and clinging to the past. He was still decent before he broke his leg, but since he came back from that injury, he has not been the same. He's had 2 fights now since then, and he looked fucking washed in both of them. He had to commit one of the worst eye pokes of all time to make it to the end against Bruno Silva. I'm not going to elaborate any further. Chris Weidman is fucking washed, and I hate him, so he's going in the F tier. Once again, everything I say on my channel is 100% facts, so don't even try to argue in the comments because I'm just going to call you a casual. Next up, we have Vince from Hell Picho. Now, he's another guy who is just another dude. He's 41 and made his UFC debut on December 15th, 2012. Somehow, this dude has been in the UFC for 12 years, but only has 11 fights. Maybe if he fought more than once a year, he would be more popular. I don't know. I'd be surprised if any of you guys actually even know who this guy is. But yeah, Vince has been washed for a minute. He honestly may have retired for all I know. But he is getting whooped by the younger generation now, and there aren't many older guys in his division, so it might be curtains for him. But yeah, he's old, he's washed, he fights once a year, if that, he's going in F tier. Almost to the end here, guys. We got Jared Cannonier up next. He's another one who doesn't feel like an old head, but he's 40, and he made his UFC debut on January 3rd, 2015. Not quite at the 10-year cutoff, but he's fucking old, so I'm counting it. I almost didn't put him on here because he's still a top 10 middleweight, but based on some of his recent performances, I unfortunately think he might be starting to get a little bit washed. He obviously can still hang, but he's just starting to look old and slow, and I think it might be getting to the beginning of the end for him. I love the Killer Gorilla, don't get me wrong, but I think here soon he might start becoming fodder for the young middleweight prospects. Anyways, Jared is for sure an old head, but he's cool as fuck and has some gas in the tank, so I'm going to put him in the A tier. Alright, next up, we got Stipe Miocic. Now, this one may seem a little redundant as he's literally fighting for the belt next, but he shouldn't be. He's literally 42 years old, and he made his UFC debut on October 8th, 2011. I know he's fighting John Jones for the belt, but this dude is washed, let's be honest. He looked like shit in his last fight against Ngannou, and that was fucking 3 years ago. I love Stipe, don't get me wrong, but he is starting to wear his age horribly. He's limping around and shit. He's literally in Reebok shorts in his picture. That's how long it's been since he fucking fought. But he's 42 and he looks fucking 50. Like, it genuinely makes no sense to me why he's fighting for the belt. He's coming off a loss 3 years ago. Like, I get it, it's a super fight, but nobody cares anymore, dude. They should have done this fight fucking 5 years ago. But no, we gotta see two old heads duke it out in November like it's fucking Thanksgiving. For real though, Stipe is definitely an old head, but he's fighting for the belt, so he obviously still isn't that washed. I think B tier is a good placement for him right now. It only makes sense that we talk about John Jones next. He is 37 years old and made his UFC debut on August 9th, 2008. Now, I'm not going to elaborate too much on this one and waste your time. He's obviously the champion right now, so he's not that bad. But he's fat, he's old, and he's washed. He looked good in the Cyril Gane fight, but before that, he looked like shit in his last few fights at light heavyweight. But yeah, I'm not going to waste y'all's time. He's a champ, so I can't justify putting him lower than S tier. But John, you're old as fuck and washed. Either fight Aspinall next, or fucking please retire. And last but not least, we got my boy Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis has got to be the most unk fighter that is currently active on the roster. You cannot tell me that Derek Lewis isn't the life of the party at every family barbecue. He is just goated, man. I love Derek. He's 39 years old and made his UFC debut on April 19th, 2014. He's the definition of a UFC old head. They even try and do the thing where they feed him to the rising prospects. Sometimes they make their name off him, but more often than not, Derek just knocks them out. Nothing better than a Derek Lewis fraud check, man. But yeah, Derek is an old head though, and through, he's still out here adding to his UFC KO record. Derek is the GOAT of old heads, and he's going in the S tier. Alright, y'all, that's it for the tier list. Before I get out of here, I want to shout out a few honorable mentions. Jan Blachowicz, Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor, and Anthony Smith. All these guys fit the criteria for sure, they just don't really feel like old heads to me yet. Jan and Dustin could literally fight for the title again. Especially Dustin, he just went toe-to-toe with the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world, Islam. But Conor and Anthony too, they just don't really feel like old heads yet. All these guys feel like they just aren't that old. I don't know. I probably missed a few here, but they must be pretty forgettable if so. Let me know down in the comments who your favorite old head is. If you guys enjoyed this absolutely factual and correct tier list, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, become a member, duplicate your account, and repeat all those steps for me. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you are not doing those things, you're just a casual, respectfully. We're on the road to 250 subscribers, so go down there and click that button unless you hate entertainment and truth, of course. As always, you're welcome for this absolutely flawless content. I'm out. Take it easy, gang.